Why does your back hurt more at 55 than it did at 35, even though you haven't injured it? A 2011 study from the University of Vermont found that in people with chronic low back pain, the fascia surrounding the spine had lost roughly 20% of its ability to glide. Not the discs, not the muscles, the fascia. That thin, slippery web of connective tissue wrapped around every muscle in your back has been sending a signal, and that signal has stopped moving. Most people over 50 blame their back pain on one of three things: a bulging disc, weak core muscles, or just getting old. Doctors reinforce this. They order MRIs. They find disc degeneration. They point at the screen and say, "There it is." And you believe them because it looks convincing. But here is what that MRI does not show you. In multiple peer-reviewed studies, researchers have scanned the spines of people with zero back pain and found the exact same disc degeneration. A large review published in the American Journal of Neuroradiology in 2015 examined 3,110 pain-free individuals. By age 50, 80% of them had disc degeneration on imaging, 80% with no pain at all. So if most people with bad-looking discs feel perfectly fine, and some people with normal-looking discs are in agony, something else is going on. Something the MRI cannot capture. That something is your fascia. Specifically, a structure called the thoracolumbar fascia, a dense, multi-layered sheet of connective tissue that wraps around the muscles of your lower back like cling film around a package. It is loaded with sensory nerve endings. It produces its own lubricant, and when it stops functioning properly, it does not just get stiff. It starts generating pain signals directly. The research is still evolving on this, but the direction is clear. Your fascia may be the most overlooked source of chronic back pain in adults over 50. And the mechanism behind it involves something most people have never heard of, a molecule called hyaluronan, and a cell that was only discovered 8 years ago. Think about your fascia like this. Imagine two sheets of plastic wrap lying flat on top of each other, with a thin layer of cooking oil between them. You can slide them back and forth easily, smooth, effortless. That oil is doing the work, reducing friction, allowing movement. Now imagine the oil dries out, or worse, imagine it thickens into glue. The two sheets stick together. You try to move them, and they resist. They bunch, they pull. That is exactly what happens inside your thoracolumbar fascia when you age. Except the oil is a molecule called hyaluronan, and the sheets are layers of dense collagen tissue that your lower back muscles depend on to move freely. Hyaluronan, also called hyaluronic acid, is one of the most abundant molecules in your body. A 70-kilogram person carries about 15 grams of it. It sits in the spaces between your fascial layers, binding water, creating a slippery, gel-like substance that allows tissues to glide over one another. Your lower back depends on this gliding every time you bend, twist, sit down, or stand up. Dr. Carla Stecco at the University of Padua in Italy has spent over a decade studying this molecule inside fascia. Her team discovered that the amount of hyaluronan varies dramatically by location. In the fascia around your ankle, where constant sliding is required, concentrations reach 90 micrograms per gram of tissue. In the fascia of your lower back, the concentration is lower but still critical. When that concentration drops, or when the hyaluronan changes its molecular structure, the fascia stops gliding. Stecco's team calls this densification, and it is not the same as scar tissue. It is a chemical change in the lubricant itself. Here is where your age matters. A 2011 study published in the Biophysical Journal by Schulze and colleagues found that fibroblasts, the cells responsible for maintaining your connective tissue, become approximately 60% more rigid as you age. 60%. These cells are supposed to be soft, flexible, and responsive to movement. In older adults, they stiffen. They stop responding to mechanical signals the way they once did. Your fascia is only as healthy as the cells inside it, and after 50, those cells are getting harder to wake up. But stiffening cells are only part of the picture. In 2018, Stecco's team at Padua made a discovery that changed the field. They identified a completely new type of cell living inside fascial tissue, never before classified. They named it the fasciocyte. Unlike regular fibroblasts, fasciocytes are plumper, rounder, and have one specific job: to produce hyaluronan. These cells sit right at the gliding interface between fascial layers, pumping out lubricant so your tissues can slide. When fasciocytes slow down, due to immobility, inflammation, or aging, the lubricant dries up. The layers stick, and that is when your back starts to hurt. Not because of a disc, not because of a nerve, because the signal, the physical, mechanical signal that allows your fascial layers to communicate through smooth movement, has stopped. But this is only half the story. What happens at the nerve level inside your fascia is even more disturbing. Your thoracolumbar fascia is not just a passive wrapper. It is one of the most richly innervated structures in your entire lower back. A 2021 study published in Scientific Reports by Fede and colleagues at the University of Padua revealed something that surprised even seasoned anatomists. Deep fascia contains a dense, hidden neural network with free nerve endings, Ruffini corpuscles, and Pacinian corpuscles distributed throughout its layers. Some researchers now argue that the fascia contains more sensory nerve endings per square centimeter than the muscle tissue it covers. Think about what that means. Your fascia is not just structural, it is sensory. It is constantly sending information to your brain about pressure, stretch, position, and pain. When those fascial layers glide smoothly, the signals are clean and organized. Your brain knows exactly where your lower back is in space, how much tension is present, and whether anything is wrong. But when the hyaluronan dries up and the layers stick together, those signals become garbled, distorted. Some of them amplify, others go silent. Your brain starts receiving bad data from your lower back, and it interprets that bad data as threat, as pain. Dr. Hélène Langevin, formerly at the University of Vermont and later director of the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health, has been studying this exact mechanism for over 2 decades. In a landmark 2009 study, her team used ultrasound imaging to examine the thoracolumbar fascia of people with chronic low back pain versus healthy controls. What they found was striking. The fascia in people with chronic pain was approximately 25% thicker than in pain-free individuals. Thicker and more disorganized. The collagen fibers had remodeled into a tangled, matted structure that could no longer slide properly. Then, in 2011, Langevin followed up with an even more revealing study. Using ultrasound elasticity imaging on 121 subjects, her team measured shear strain, the ability of one fascial layer to glide over another during forward bending. In people with chronic low back pain, shear strain was reduced by about 20%. Their fascia had essentially frozen in place. Not from injury, not from a herniated disc, from a loss of internal gliding. If you have ever woken up at 4 a.m. with a dull, aching stiffness across your lower back, that deep, grinding kind that has no obvious cause, this is what is happening inside your body. Your fascial layers are stuck. The lubricant has thickened. The nerve endings embedded in those layers are firing distress signals, and your brain is reading all of it as pain. If this is making sense and you want the third part of this, the part about what actually reactivates that gliding mechanism, subscribe now, because that section is coming in a few minutes, and it changes the entire way you think about back pain after 50. Depending on who you ask, the fascia is either a secondary player in back pain or the primary driver of it. But there is one more layer to this, something that happens specifically between midnight and early morning that most people never connect to their back. What almost nobody talks about is the relationship between your movement patterns during the day and what your fascia does while you sleep. Hyaluronan is not static. It turns over rapidly. In some tissues, its half-life is as short as 2 to 5 days. Your body is constantly producing new hyaluronan and breaking down the old. But here is the critical detail. The production of hyaluronan by fasciocytes is mechanically driven. It depends on movement. Specifically, it depends on a process called mechanotransduction, the conversion of physical force into chemical signals inside a cell. Here is the simplest way to understand it. When you move your lower back, when you twist, bend, walk, or even shift your weight from one foot to the other, you are physically deforming the cells inside your fascia. That deformation activates receptors on the cell surface called integrins. Those integrins trigger a cascade of internal signals that tell the cell to do its job, produce hyaluronan, remodel collagen, maintain the tissue. When you stop moving, when you sit for 8 hours or lie in one position all night, those signals go quiet. The fasciocytes receive no mechanical input. Hyaluronan production slows. The existing hyaluronan begins to change. Short-chain fragments of hyaluronan, which are naturally stickier and more inflammatory than the long-chain version, start to accumulate. The fascial layers that were once slippery begin to bind. This is why your back feels worst in the morning. Not because you slept wrong, because during 6 to 8 hours of near immobility, your fascial lubricant has partially solidified. The layers have begun to adhere. and the first movements of your day are literally peeling those layers apart. Some scientists dispute whether hyaluronan degradation alone fully explains this phenomenon, but the clinical pattern is consistent across studies. Morning stiffness in the lower back that eases after 15 to 30 minutes of movement is a hallmark of fascial dysfunction, not disc disease. Dr. Robert Schleip, who directs the fascia research project at Ulm University in Germany, has documented that fascial tissue can contract independently of muscle. His research has shown that fascia contains smooth muscle-like cells called myofibroblasts that can generate their own tension. In older adults, these cells may contribute to a chronic low-grade tightening of the thoracolumbar fascia, a background tension you cannot consciously relax because it is not muscular, it is fascial. Read that again. There is a tension in your lower back that stretching your muscles will never release because the source of it is not your muscles. It is the connective tissue around them. So the question becomes, if your fascia has this built-in lubrication system, and that system is driven by mechanical signals, how do you reactivate it? There are specific, evidence-based actions that can restore fascial gliding in your lower back. These are not generic stretches. They target the exact mechanisms we have been discussing: hyaluronan production, mechanotransduction activation, and fascial layer mobility. Step 1. Sustained, slow-loaded stretching for 90 to 120 seconds per position. Standard 15-second stretches do not reach your fascia. Research from Schleip's team at Ulm University has demonstrated that fascial tissue requires sustained loading, held for at least 90 seconds, to trigger the viscoelastic creep that allows layers to separate. Your daily practice should include a standing forward fold, a seated spinal twist, and a supported side-lying stretch, each held for a minimum of 2 minutes. Do this within 20 minutes of waking, when fascial adhesion is at its peak. Step 2. Micro-movement loading throughout the day. A 2013 study by Roman and colleagues used fluid mechanics modeling to show that gentle, repetitive oscillation of the fascia, small rocking movements, pelvic tilts, slow torso rotations, causes a pressure change in the hyaluronan layer that physically pumps lubricant through the tissue. You do not need a gym. Every 45 minutes, stand up and perform 60 seconds of slow pelvic circles, gentle spinal waves, or even a controlled hip hinge. This is not exercise, it is fascial maintenance. Step 3. Foam rolling the thoracolumbar region, but correctly. Place a foam roller horizontally under your mid-back. Cross your arms over your chest. Slowly roll from the bottom of your ribcage to the top of your pelvis, spending 5 to 6 seconds on each segment. The sustained pressure mimics what the Roman study described. It deforms the fascia, alters hyaluronan fluid dynamics, and temporarily restores gliding capacity. 2 to 3 minutes, once daily. Step 4. Temperature application before morning movement. Hyaluronan viscosity is directly influenced by temperature. Research published by Mattini and colleagues in 2009 demonstrated that at body temperature, hyaluronan maintains a flowing state, but in cooler conditions, it becomes more viscous and gel-like. Apply a warm compress or heating pad to your lower back for 5 minutes before your morning stretches. This pre-warms the fascial lubricant and reduces the mechanical force needed to restore gliding. Step 5. Hydration timing. Hyaluronan binds water at a ratio far exceeding its own weight. Dr. Antonio Stecco, working alongside Carla Stecco at the University of Padua, has emphasized that adequate hydration is a prerequisite for healthy fascial function. Drink 12 to 16 ounces of water within 30 minutes of waking, before coffee, before food, to support the rehydration of fascial ground substance that has been depleted overnight. If even one of these steps was new to you, hit like. It tells the algorithm to show this to more people who need it. Dr. Langevin has been prescribing movement-based fascial protocols to patients over 60 since the early 2010s, and her research consistently shows measurable improvement in fascial mobility within 4 to 6 weeks of daily practice. Here is the larger truth that most back pain conversations miss entirely. Your body was designed to move, not occasionally, not vigorously, but constantly, in small ways, all day long. Every subtle shift, every weight transfer, every twist of the torso sends a mechanical signal deep into the connective tissue that holds you together. That signal tells your fasciocytes to produce lubricant. It tells your fibroblasts to maintain collagen. It tells your nerve endings that everything is working as intended. When that signal stops, when you spend your days sitting, your nights rigid, and your mornings reaching for ibuprofen, the system does not break. It does not fail. It simply goes quiet. The fascia stops receiving instructions. The hyaluronan thickens. The layers bind. And the pain you feel is not damage. It is silence. That is the shift in understanding that changes everything. You are not falling apart. Your tissues are not degenerating beyond repair. Your fascia is waiting for a signal that you have stopped sending. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. What was the one thing in this video you wish you had known 10 years ago? I would bet most of you have felt that stubborn morning stiffness and assumed it was arthritis or just age. Now you know what it actually is. Your back does not hurt because you are old. It hurts because you stopped speaking to it. Stiffness is not aging. It is silence. Share this with someone who has been blaming their back pain on a disc for years. And if you have not subscribed yet, you should. What is coming next week is something I have been researching for months. Your fascia is listening. The only question is whether you will answer.